Pinup Audio presents Unexpected Christmas with the Seal. Written by Whitley Cox. Performed in dual narration by Molly Stark and Liam DeCosimo. Chapter 1. Hannah. "Everything will be fine," Hannah said for what felt like the millionth time. "I've been here before. I know not to let the animals starve. I know how to muck a stall. And besides, all these critters love me. You see how excited they get when I walk into the barn. I may even open all the stalls and have just a big ol' 4-H cuddle puddle." Her Uncle Asher grunted and shook his head in disapproval. He knew she was kidding, but there was a flash of unease in his blue eyes that said he didn't altogether believe she was kidding. "Well, you can let out everyone but Fumble," Nate, her other uncle, and the far less grumpy and less serious one, said. "That dick of a goat is in solitary confinement for the foreseeable future." "He's just misunderstood," Hannah said, grinning. "I can relate." "We'll only be gone to the wedding for a few days, and you can always call Cal. He's on standby," Asher said. "I'll be fine. You managed this place on your own while humping my friend. I have nobody to hump, so I'll definitely be able to keep myself busy." "Stop saying hump," Asher grumbled. Hannah snorted and flicked her long, dark, curly ponytail over her shoulder before pulling her phone from the back pocket of her jeans and checking the time. "Don't you two need to get a move on? Isn't your flight in like 5 hours? And it's international, to the exotic land of Canada, so you need to be there early. Have you studied the local dialect, local traditions? I hear they like it if you say hello and bonjour when you meet them, and to always apologize even if you're not the one at fault." Nate snorted and hitched his duffel bag over his shoulder. Asher merely rolled his eyes, then slung his duffel bag over his shoulder, too. Go, I'll be fine. No mares are getting ready to foal, no goats are getting ready to kid, and I'll make sure I keep Fumble locked up like freaking Hannibal Lecter. Only let him out for a dinner of fava beans and a nice Chianti." "Fucking smartass," Asher said with a surly grumble, opening the door to the farmhouse and stepping out into the chilly late December air. Even though Asher and Nate were her uncles, they were only 10 years older than her, since their dad had been from her grandfather's second marriage, so she grew up with her uncles acting more like brothers or cousins. Though sometimes Asher liked to pull the uncle card and demand respect, of which Hannah rarely obliged. It was just too much fun to poke the gruff old bear. Though he had softened substantially since marrying Hannah's best friend, Triss. And now the two of them were expecting a baby. So, not only was Hannah's best friend also her aunt, but she was giving Hannah a little cousin soon. That would surely soften up Asher even more. Hopefully. They headed to one of their trucks, and she stood on the front porch, tugging the sides of her long, cable-knit gray cardigan around her and crossing her arms. There was snow on the ground, but not so much that flights were getting canceled. And, as it stood right now, there wasn't snow in the forecast for a few days, so the guys needed to take this window of pleasant weather to get their asses to the airport. Normally, they had ranch hands that worked daily on the ranch, but most of them were off for Christmas. A few would pop by to check on things, but Hannah knew she had everything under control. "Behave," Asher said with a stern glare of warning before swinging his big frame behind the steering wheel. "I always do," she teased. "Yeah, right." He shut the truck door, and pretty soon the Ford pickup was rumbling down the gravel driveway toward the main road. Hannah didn't stand on the porch for long before her toes started to tingle, so she headed inside, where a cup of tea called her name. After Triss moved in and married Asher, the farmhouse had experienced a significant facelift. The kitchen cupboards were freshly painted a clean and bright white. The kitchen walls were now a friendly butter yellow with no-nonsense roll-down blinds over the window, and the living room was far less dark than Hannah remembered. Triss mentioned painting that a brighter beige color, too. There was also quite a few feminine touches, like throw pillows, blankets, houseplants, and other homey things. Nothing kitschy, and certainly no knickknacks, but you could tell a woman lived in the house now. Asher and Triss were building a house elsewhere on the property, but they'd hit a snag, so building was at a standstill. There was a supply shortage that builders were experiencing across the country, which meant small, rural builds suffered because all available supplies went to the big cities first. So even though they had broken ground on their new place, it wasn't quite ready for them to move in. And now, Triss's sister, Mika, was also living on the ranch, since she had fallen in love with Nate over the summer. As far as Hannah knew, Mika and Nate were going to continue living in the farmhouse, while Asher and Triss eventually moved to their own place with the new baby. Triss and Mika flew out to the wedding ahead of Asher and Nate, since it was their baby sister, Rayma, getting married. They needed to help with wedding prep, the bachelorette party, and they also just wanted to spend some time with their other sisters. It was bizarre, being in a house that was usually so full of life, noise, and happiness, but was suddenly eerily quiet. As someone who worked and lived in downtown Manhattan, Hannah wasn't used to the quiet that surrounded her as she padded through the warm farmhouse, into the happy, spacious kitchen, with the live edge table and old mismatched chairs. Normally, she could hear street noise all day long, and her upstairs neighbors stomping around in her apartment building. There was no such thing as true silence when you lived in the chaos that was New York. But she also loved it. It had been her home since she finished grad school and got a job at the clinic she was with now. She loved her job as a speech pathologist. It was her true calling. And it was grad school where she met Triss, her BFF, and now, technically, her aunt. The click-click of nails on the hardwood floor had her heart rate relaxing. Bruno, her uncle's Merle Australian Shepherd, came sauntering into the kitchen. He did a classic downward dog stretch, giving her some serious puppy eyes. Only, his puppy eyes differed from most, since his eyes were actually different colors. He was a beautiful dog, though, and smart as a whip. "It's just you and me for a few days, buddy. Are we going to spoon at night? I'm cool with it, as long as you promise not to fart in the bed." Bruno sat down and cocked his head to the side. She filled up the kettle and set it on the gas stove to boil. "Uncle Asher thinks I can't handle it here for a few days, but I'll show him. Nay, we'll show him. We'll clean the house from top to bottom, muck stalls, and maybe I'll even teach you some new tricks." Bruno just kept tipping his head from side to side. "Or should I take on a real challenge and teach Fumble to be a civilized goat who doesn't pee on himself, anyone else, or escape?" Bruno yawned, then fell to his belly, gazing up at her with enormous eyes of doubt. "Yeah, I thought that might be a little much for the time we have. Don't want to fly too close to the sun the first time around." Eventually, the kettle whistled, and she pulled it off the stove, just as there was a knock at the door. Bruno barked and trotted to the front door while Hannah set down the kettle on the cool side of the gas stove and turned off the element on the side she'd just been using. The last thing she needed was to torch her uncle's house 20 minutes into her house-sitting gig. She headed to the front door and swung it open. Her jaw dropped.
Cal was driving home from Denver when he got a text message from Asher asking him to swing by the ranch. His and Nate's niece, Hannah, was house-sitting for them over Christmas while Nate and Asher attended a wedding in Canada. Cal already knew this and was on standby if Hannah needed any help, but he hadn't been anticipating getting a message from Asher so soon. But Asher just wanted Cal to pop in and introduce himself to Hannah so she didn't feel so awkward calling a stranger if she needed a hand. Luckily, the Harris brothers' ranch was on his way home, so he swung down the driveway and rumbled his black Chevy Silverado toward the farmhouse. He clumped his boots up the freshly swept porch steps, opened the screen door, and rapped his scarred and freckled knuckles against the worn wood. A bark from inside told him that Bruno was there. He loved Bruno, and Bruno loved him. Well, Bruno loved everyone, as long as they rubbed his belly. But Cal liked to think he and Bruno had a special relationship. Bruno understood Cal. Bruno just wanted belly rubs, He didn't need Cal to talk up a storm. A simple dog for a simple man. Cal thought about getting himself a dog like Bruno, but so far he hadn't connected with a pup or even a rescue dog the way he did with his friend's dog. The door opened to reveal an amber-eyed beauty with dark curly hair and a high ponytail. "Can I help you?" she asked, her jaw having dropped and eyes gone wide when she first opened the door and gave him a thorough and appreciative once-over. He scratched the back of his neck, but then dropped to a crouch and scratched Bruno behind the ears when the dog started rubbing his sides up against Cal's leg for attention. "Name's Cal. Your uncle's told me to stop by and check on things." Her growl had Bruno glancing up at her in surprise. "Seriously? They've been gone for like 30 minutes. Did they honestly think I was going to torch the place that quickly?" Cal shrugged. "Just doing as I've been asked. Thought I should come and introduce myself." He continued to give Bruno attention, even when the dog rolled onto his back and shamelessly exposed his belly for rubs. "Well, as you can see, Bruno is fine. I'm fine. The ranch is fine. The horses and goats are fine. Everything here is just fine. So," she flicked her fingers in front of her, "you can go." He'd heard from Asher and Nate, as well as Asher's wife Triss, that Hannah was a fiery one, and he could certainly see her spark. The smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth from her sass had him wanting to stick around just to see if she could turn those sparks into flames. But he also didn't want to upset her. The harsh set of her jaw told him she was a stubborn woman and probably didn't like that her uncles had secured her a babysitter. Standing up to his full height, which elicited a mild whimper of disappointment from Bruno, he gave her a curt nod, kept his head down, and turned to go. "All right then. You take care. Call me if you need anything." "I won't," she said haughtily. "Hope not." The gravel crunched beneath his boots as he made his way to the truck. Bruno lumbered down the steps behind him and was hot on his heels. "Bruno!" Hannah called. "Inside, boy!" But Bruno wasn't done with Cal, and his tongue lolled out the side of his mouth as he smiled up at Cal and trotted beside him. "I know, boy, I want more time with you too, but the lady has sent me on my way." Hannah snorted from the porch steps, her arms crossed over her chest as she glared at him. He bent down and gave Bruno another ear scratch, which just made the dog's tail go berserk. Then he opened the door to his truck. "Bruno, come on!" Hannah called again. Bruno glanced back toward her, then up at Cal, then back to Hannah, then back to Cal. Hannah made a frustrated noise in her throat, ducked back into the house, and came out with winter boots on. She made a point of stomping dramatically down the porch steps, then across the gravel driveway with the clumps of snow scattered around. "Come on, Bruno, in the house. I'll give you a piece of cheese when we get inside." She bent over and reached for his collar and hooked 2 fingers around it, giving the dog a gentle tug. Cal opened his truck door. "It's supposed to freeze hard tonight. Make sure you stoke the stove before you go to bed, he said as he climbed in behind the steering wheel. "I know," she blurted. "I've been here plenty of times." "All right, then. You take care." He turned over the key and she backed up with Bruno, her fingers still in his collar so that Cal could close his door. He gave the angry beauty another head nod, put the truck into drive, and slowly headed back in the direction he came. A quick glance in the rearview mirror showed Hannah standing there in the driveway watching him. And she was still watching him when he reached the end of the lane and paused under the arch for Harris Brothers Ranch. Another smile curled the corners of his mouth. He couldn't see her face from how far away he was now, but he could feel her ire. She didn't want help. She didn't like that her uncles had sent Cal to check on her. He hoped she succeeded and had an event-free time at the ranch, where she didn't need to call Cal for help. But he also kind of hoped she did, because he really wanted to see her again. Chapter 2. Cal. The next day was Christmas Eve, and even though Cal knew Hannah probably had everything totally under control, he liked her and wanted to see her again. Asher also texted and asked Cal to check in on her again. Cal thought Asher was being a little excessive, but he was also a soldier and did what was asked of him. Besides, it gave him a legitimate excuse to see Hannah again. Though she was not happy to see him. "I have it under control," she growled, work gloves on her hands, black gumboots on her feet, and the smell of fresh hay and manure surrounding her as she stood in Macklin's stall and mucked it. Macklin was outside with a few of the other horses so that Hannah could clean out their stalls. "I can see that," Cal said, standing at the open door of the stall, his hands on his hips as he appreciated the way her dark-washed jeans hugged her ass just right. The woman had curves in all the right places. Doesn't mean you don't have to take help when it's offered. I don't need help. She tossed a pile of horseshit into the wheelbarrow, huffed, stood up straight, and used the back of her wrist to swipe a stray tendril of hair out of her eyes. The glare she gave him had his dick twitching. Least of all from the babysitter my uncle's hired. They didn't hire me. I'm just a friend and neighbor. Who apparently has nowhere else to be on Christmas Eve than bugging me? That was true. Cal had nowhere else to be. He was an only child. Both his parents were dead, and all his cousins were in Europe, Australia, or New Zealand, and he barely knew them anyway. His family had been a found one made up of his brothers in arms, Nate Blaze Harris, Asher Ash Harris, Barnes Wark, Roberto Rob Cahill, Riker Reich McKnight, Decker Deck McKnight, Aaron Steele, and Colton Colt Hastings. There had been 10 of them altogether, but Brendan Joker O'Shea took his own life several years ago. It was something they were all still trying to come to terms with, to understand. They were a team, brothers. Why hadn't Brendan reached out for help if he'd been hurting? Why suffer in silence? And the worst part about it was that he left behind a wife and new baby girl. Cal and his brothers all sent money to Molly for Sasha's college fund every year. That little girl would never go without. Neither would her mother. Besides Reich, Deck, and Cal, the rest were all married or had a good woman and were having kids. They were also all spread out around the globe, so it wasn't too often they were all together. Hell, Cal had been the only one who couldn't attend Asher's wedding last year because he was on a flying mission. He'd missed out on their reunion. It was partly what prompted him to move to Colorado for a bit. Just him and his bird. His Bell 204B helicopter. He didn't have a dog, or children, or a woman, but his Belle, or Bella, as he called her, was his partner. Move, please. Cal blinked and realized he'd been lost in thought. Hannah was trying to get past him with a wheelbarrow and shovel. Her glare was deep, and her mouth pinched into a cute frown. Sorry, he said, stepping out of the way. He followed her to the next stall. You know, I've done this before, too. Many hands make light work. We could have it done in half the time if we did it together. No thanks. Like the exercise. Keeps me busy. And it kept her from thinking too hard about something else. She didn't have to say it for him to see it in her eyes. She was hurting about something, and she projected that pain and that anger, not only onto him because he was an easy target, but also into her work. If she worked herself bone-tired, then she couldn't think about whatever was bothering her. Cal knew that avoidance technique well. He lived it. Ignoring her, he located another shovel and wheelbarrow, then moved to the next stall and started to muck it out. Do you have wax in your ears or something? Probably. Why? Because I said no thanks. Heard you, but I'd still like to help. Go home. Be with your family on Christmas. Leave me alone. Which is clearly how I'm meant to be. That last bit was mumbled, but Cal had impeccable hearing and heard it crystal clear. No family, he said as he took a big scoop of horse shit with the shovel and heaved it into the wheelbarrow. Just me and Bella. Then go home to Bella. She's pretty quiet, and there's no need to start her up right now, so... The sound of a spade being plunged into a pile of shit filled his ears, followed by the huff of an angry woman. He glanced beside him through the wooden slats that separated the upper portion of the two stalls. It was so the horses could see each other but not nip each other. She had her hands on her hips and glowered at him. Who or what the fuck is Bella? My helicopter. He flashed her a smile. Her glower faded, then she rolled her eyes, grabbed her shovel again, and started mucking. Well, then go home and be with your helicopter. She paused again and turned to him. Wait, you're not one of those fetish freaks who has actually married an inanimate object, are you? Because I've read about men marrying their cars or their blow-up dolls and other things they've become obsessed with. Cal snorted and got back to shoveling manure. No, I'm not married to my helicopter. We have a very healthy relationship. No funny business. She keeps me safe in the air, and in return, I keep her in tip-top flying shape. That's it.
Kind of hoped you'd say you were married to her and that she was expecting helicopter kittens in the spring.
Cal barked out a laugh. Helicopter kittens?
Well, what the fuck else do you call baby helicopters? Copties?
I don't know, but helicopter kittens implies that I'm a cat, does it not?
She growled. Whatever. Still think you should go home to your pregnant helicopter and leave me be. I'm fine by myself.
I can see that, but I'm also happy to help. She huffed some more, but stopped arguing with him. Like he figured, they were finished with all the stalls in probably half the time it would have taken her if she'd done it just herself. They had to pause to bring other horses back in and take new horses out. Then once the horse stalls were done, they went to the goat barn and mucked those stalls. Mostly, she was quiet. She didn't start any conversations with him, but she also seemed resigned to the fact that he wasn't going anywhere until the work was done. Truth be told, even though he usually enjoyed being by himself, Cal was lonely. He didn't want children, was probably too old anyway at 43, and he hadn't had a serious girlfriend since his first year of flight school. After that, life got too chaotic. He joined the Navy, then he was recruited to the SEALs and Special Forces. He didn't have time for a relationship. And he also didn't think it would be fair to force a woman to be in a relationship with him when he was rarely home for more than a week every few months. And when he wasn't home, he was off doing dangerous things. Sure, he hooked up and had the odd weekend or week-long fling, but nothing that lasted. Nothing with any more depth than a highway puddle. But now that he wasn't working those dangerous jobs anymore, just flying bellow when someone needed him, he had time. He had the time to devote to someone and a relationship. And he wanted one. "So, how long are you in Colorado?" he asked as they filled up the water troughs for the goats.
Until my uncles are back, she said,
scratching behind one of the goat's ears when it stuck its head between the slats of the pen and rubbed its face against Hannah's thigh. "Then where do you go?"
Back home.
Oh man, it was like pulling teeth to get this woman to open up. And normally, he wouldn't really give a shit. He was a closed book with glued pages and an elephant sitting on top of the book for good measure. But something about Hannah made him want to get deeper than just a puddle on the highway. Maybe it was that comment earlier about how she thought she was meant to be alone, or her stubbornness and determination to take care of the entire ranch herself. But whatever it was, he was drawn to her. He wanted to know more. "And home is?" Asher and Nate hadn't told him much about Hannah, just that she was their niece from their father's first marriage, and she was Triss's, Asher's wife, best friend.
Manhattan, she said. I live and work there.
Oh, wow, from the big city to the country. Her brows lifted as if he was telling her a joke she'd heard 6 million times before. He'd never had to work this hard to get a woman's attention in his life, and for some strange reason, he liked it.
So you're like what they call a daywalker, huh?
She asked, her eyes roaming his body from the front of his jeans up to the tip of his red hair he kept slightly longer than he probably should. It was his only form of rebellion against all his years of service. He grew his hair out as soon as he retired from active duty. It curled slightly around his ears, and where he let it get too long, a curl fell over his forehead. And right now, it was too long. What?" he asked, cocking a smile.
Like a ginger who can tan. A daywalker. You won't burn like the pasty gingers?
He snorted and rolled his eyes. "I guess that's true, though I've never heard the term daywalker."
Do you live under a rock?
"No, in a cabin."
Does it have Wi-Fi?
"Sometimes." She made a noise in her throat.
I'm going to go check on the chickens.
Even though she didn't invite him, he followed her. He liked Hannah, and he could tell she was warming up to him, too. Sort of. Slowly. Painfully slowly.
Hannah. Cal confused her. And she was already confused, so his presence just compounded that confusion. She was sad because she had nowhere to be for Christmas and was alone. And yet, this sexy red-headed seal with the scars all over his freckled hands and green eyes the color of spinach wouldn't leave her alone. Maybe it was because his presence was at the behest of her uncles, not because he wanted to be there, because he wanted to be with her. It was because he was friends with her uncles and doing them a favor by babysitting her, so she didn't blow up the ranch and kill all the animals. If he had a choice, he probably wouldn't be there either. Probably wouldn't want to be around her for Christmas, just like everyone else. Her mother and stepfather were down in Florida at their timeshare and did not invite Hannah. Her father and stepmother lived in Utah and were having all her stepmother's family over for the holidays, so there was no room for Hannah. There never was. And her brothers, Will and Sam, were in Hawaii with their wives and kids. Hannah wasn't invited to join them either. Will said that was because Hannah didn't have a partner or kids. They all thought she would be bored and feel like a ninth wheel or whatever. So much assuming. Just because she was on the fence about having children of her own didn't mean she didn't love the crap out of her nieces and nephews. She spoiled them rotten and was 100% hands-on and present with them when she was around. There was a reason they called her their favorite aunt, because she'd earned that title. And she would have gladly tagged along to Hawaii and babysat while the couples went on dates. But they didn't even consider her. Didn't even offer. And when she brought that up to Will on the phone, he just said that he and Sam figured she'd be bored, so they didn't want to make her feel like she had to come. That just proved how little anyone in her family really knew her. So, there she was, alone, on the ranch in Colorado because nobody wanted her around for Christmas. And her uncles didn't even trust her to feed the goats, so now she had a broad-shouldered seal as her babysitter. There was a reason she cried herself to sleep last night. It was because this Christmas was going to suck even more than the Christmas 2 years ago, when she broke her hip slipping on ice. At least when that happened, she was in the hospital with nurses and doctors and didn't feel so lonely. Yes, she was feeling sorry for herself, was throwing a one-person pity party complete with streamers of despair and balloons of melancholy. But whatever. Nobody was around to see it. Nobody was around to care. And the one man who was there was only there out of obligation and probably didn't give two horseshoes about why she was alone for Christmas. They reached the chicken coop where the hens all hummed and clucked around outside, pecking and scratching among the clumps of dirty snow and hard ground to find food. She'd opened up the coop and fed them earlier that morning, while also collecting the eggs. But some hens hadn't laid yet, so she was checking for late lays. Her omelet that morning for breakfast had been rich and delicious with 2 bright orange yolks, a sprinkle of nutritional yeast, dried parsley, and Old Bay seasoning. "This one is my favorite," Cal said, pointing to a rusty feathered hen that approached the fence when he crouched down. "Hennifer." Hennifer did a weird chicken purr noise, and Cal reached 2 of his long fingers through the wire and petted the top of her head. She did her purr sound again and closed her eyes. "A sucker for affection, like Macklin," he said with a chuckle. "Aren't you, girl?" Hennifer settled down on the ground until her feet were no longer visible, but not before she inched closer to the fence, causing some of her feathers to push through. She continued to make that purring chicken sound. Hannah rolled her eyes and wandered behind the coop, where she opened the hatch to check the nesting boxes. There were 8 more eggs from late layers, so she put them in one of the wire baskets, made sure the chickens had enough feed and that their water trough was clean and full, then closed the hatch and wandered back around to where Cal was petting Hennifer. Only now, more hens had joined his harem. "I only have 2 hands, ladies." His raspy chuckle made Hannah's lower belly do a little flutter. He was now petting 2 hens, while another tried to inch her way into the queue. "You might need to join in," he said, glancing up at her. "They're pretty persistent." She rolled her eyes again, but set down the egg basket and crouched beside him, reaching her hands through the wire fence. Another chicken approached, so now they were each petting 2. "You're making Yoko Ono and Feather Locklear very happy." He turned to face her, which caused his knee to bump into hers. Another flutter in her belly. She gave him a look. "You know them all by name?" "Don't you?" "No." "Chickens are as individual as horses and humans. You just need to get to know them. Like, Feather Locklear is a bit of a bitch. She can be really bossy and act like she owns the coop. Hennifer here is a pushover and lets any chicken take her feed or shove her out of the way. She needs to learn how to stand up for herself. And yet, she's your favorite? I like an underdog. What can I say? She's also the sweetest of the bunch. Very affectionate. Okay. All of a sudden, Hannah wasn't so keen on petting a farmyard bully and glared at Feather Locklear as she redirected the majority of her attention to Yolko Ono. And what about the one you're petting? What's she like? Who? Gwyneth Poultry? Hannah snorted. If that's the one whose head you're scratching with your left hand, then yes. Well, Gwyneth can be a little impatient. She bulldozed right into Hennifer and tried to push Hennifer out of the way, which Hennifer was going to allow, but I put my other hand in and Gwyneth calmed down. It's like a soap opera, with all the conflicting personalities in here. Oh, it's worse than a soap opera. At least with a soap opera, they all go home to their mansions to get away from their enemy. After slapping them, of course. Of course. Wait, did that mean you watched soap operas? Here, though, he went on, they have to listen to their enemies snore and break bread with them, all while resisting the urge to peck them to death. He stood up and grunted like a man who'd seen shit, done shit, and was in his 40s would. What are you making for Christmas dinner tomorrow night? Why, you inviting yourself over? She stood up as well and grabbed the wire handle of the egg basket, shivering when a gust of icy wind swept across the back of her neck. She pulled the hood of her jacket up over her ponytail. The chickens made sounds of frustration from no longer getting attention, but eventually they realized the petting was over, so they dispersed among the yard. Truth be told, she had no plans for a fancy Christmas dinner. She had a chicken Caesar salad last night and planned to do it again tonight and tomorrow. No, I was going to see if you wanted to come over. I bought a small, organic, free-range turkey from Ed's farm and was going to cook it up, complete with all the sides, and my grand's famous mushroom gravy. And every sane person knows you can't have turkey without stuffing, mashed potatoes, and green bean casserole. That'd be like having Tom without Jerry, or Fred without Barney. It just doesn't make sense. You don't have to do this, you know. Do what? He scrunched his brows, which also caused his slightly crooked nose to crinkle upward. She'd never been super attracted to men with freckles, but Cal really pulled them off, which was a good thing, because his face and hands were covered in them. She assumed his arms were too. Take pity on me. Babysit me. I know you're only doing it because Asher and Nate asked you to, or because you feel bad that I'm alone, but you don't have to. I'm completely capable and fine here by myself. I haven't let anyone starve or burned the place down. I am an adult. Just because I live in an apartment in the city doesn't mean I'm not capable on a ranch in the country. Never said any of those things. You don't have to. I can see it in your eyes, just like I could see it in my uncle's eyes. Nobody thinks I can do this, just like nobody wants me around for Christmas. So why don't you just take your pity and your weird nostalgic television show choices and leave? Then, before she cried in front of a complete stranger, she stomped off toward the farmhouse. Bruno had abandoned them after she'd mucked the third stall and was just snoozing on the front porch. But when he saw her and her state of unraveling, he got to his feet and whimpered, then rose onto his hind legs and put his front paws on her lap. I'm fine, she said to him with a sniff, opening the screen door to the house, then pushing open the wooden one. She didn't bother to look behind her before the door closed. But as she was wiping her eyes with her thumbs, having put the eggs into the fridge, she heard the telltale rumble of Cal's truck, followed by the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. She knew he wouldn't be any different from everyone else. Nobody wanted to be with her. It was why she couldn't hang on to a boyfriend, and why her parents and siblings had nothing to do with her. She was too much. She knew she could be a tough pill to swallow sometimes. She'd always been someone who spoke her mind, paid little attention to filtering herself, and dealt with problems head-on. She didn't shy away from confrontation. But because she didn't shy away from it, her family thought she liked it. That wasn't the case at all. She simply knew when it was necessary and how to handle herself. Maybe she was a tad aggressive sometimes with her approach, but she'd always been a blunt person. But a person who got shit done. In her opinion, anybody who liked confrontation was weird and wrong and needed medical help. There was a significant difference between knowing when confrontation was needed so you could use it to move forward, but still disliking it, opposed to avoiding it altogether so nothing was ever accomplished and everyone just remained silently seething and miserable. That was how her parents had been. They hated each other since as far back as Hannah could remember. A big part of her thought it was because Hannah had been an oopsie third child, and neither parent wanted her. She believed, and still did, that she was the reason for her parents' unhappiness, for her family's unhappiness. They only wanted 2 children, had a third, essentially ruining their lives. Her parents' constant bickering, backbiting, and passive-aggressive behavior made Hannah and her brother's lives just abysmal. Instead of dealing with their issues and either going to counseling or getting a divorce, they remained miserable and non-confrontational. It wasn't until one day, Hannah, at age 14, stood up at the dinner table and told them to get a divorce because their misery was making everyone else miserable. She was sent to her room for the night because of that outburst, but it was worth it for the discussion it elicited between her parents. Within a month of her speaking up, her parents filed for divorce, and her father moved out. Both her parents were much happier now, even if Hannah wasn't particularly fond of her step-parents. Neither of her parents ever thanked her for speaking up. Her brothers either, though both of her brothers ended up marrying strong-willed women who were a lot like Hannah. And her stepmother was also very opinionated, and didn't shy away from confrontation. Funny how that happened. Her phone in her back pocket warbled, and she reached for it, sniffling again and grabbing a piece of paper towel off the roll to dab at her eyes. It was a text message from Triss. How goes ranch life? Hopefully it's not too boring. Don't forget that Macklin is a great listener and secret keeper if you need to pour out your heart. Or you can always call me. Hannah smiled at her friend's message. She didn't want to burden Triss with her problems. Triss's life was full and busy. She was expecting a baby soon, and was currently at her sister's wedding, and navigating her own terrible parents. So she just sent back a message that wouldn't prompt an emergency phone call from Triss. All quiet on the Western Front. Hard to be bored when there is so much to do. Bruno is keeping me company, and is also a skilled listener and secret keeper. How's my cousin? Triss sent an emoji of a pregnant woman. Using my bladder as a trampoline. They texted back innocuous messages for another 15 minutes. Then Triss said she had to go do something and signed off. Bruno had found his bed in front of the wood stove and was curled up, snoring. She was exhausted from working nonstop since waking up early and could have easily fallen onto the couch and passed out. But she knew that wouldn't do her any good. She needed to keep busy. There was still plenty to do around the ranch. There always was. If she kept busy, then she didn't have time to let her loneliness fester. Besides, how lonely could someone really be on a ranch with over 100 animals on it? The answer was pretty freaking lonely.
Chapter 3. Cal. The tears that she tried to hide gutted him. The woman was so fucking stubborn, so fucking strong. She could handle that ranch entirely on her own. Cal knew it. Hell, he was pretty sure Asher and Nate knew it too. But she didn't have to do it all on her own. That was the difference. If there was anything being in the Navy and working with his SEAL team had taught him, it was that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. Doing it on your own when you don't have to is prideful and can get people killed. If you have people in your corner, if you have a team, ask for help. But something told him Hannah didn't really have much of a team. He knew she had brothers, but Cal didn't know much about them. He also knew that her parents were divorced and lived on opposite sides of the country. Again, that was the gist of his knowledge. He didn't ask for more from Nate when he was talking about his niece, and Nate didn't volunteer more. Perhaps Cal should have asked, though, or asked Triss for more information. He could see that his presence there was only upsetting her more, so he jumped in his truck and left. But that didn't mean he was going to stay away for very long. Hannah was hurting, and if there was anything Cal was, it was a fixer. Cars, fences, helicopters, broken mugs, and even people. He fixed them. Or at least he tried to. So he drove home, gathered what he needed out of his fridge and pantry. He didn't bother with a cooler since it was cold as balls outside and nothing would thaw in the 20 minutes it rode in the bed of his truck. Then, as it grew dark outside, he headed back to the Harris Brothers ranch. The motion sensor light came on when he pulled back into the driveway and a bark from the barn announced his presence. But no dog or person came out. He left the stuff in the truck and glanced toward the farmhouse. Smoke rose from the chimney and there were a few lights on inside, but he knew she wasn't in there. If Bruno was in the barn, so was Hannah. A quick check of the chicken coop showed it closed up for the night. The goat barn was locked and all the horses had been brought in from the field. She really could do it all. He opened the side door of the barn and stepped inside, the scent of fresh hay wafting up his nostrils. Bruno raced over for a greeting. Cal gave him the necessary amount of attention before Bruno trotted off to go on another perimeter patrol. A few horses made noises of salutation, but when one particular horse's head didn't swing out over the stall door, he knew exactly where to find Hannah. "Go away, Cal," Hannah called from Macklin's stall. He didn't listen and proceeded down the barn until he reached Macklin's stall. He peered over the half door where he found Hannah sitting on the ground and Macklin sort of sitting in her lap as she petted him, and he nuzzled her head with the side of his. "Are you stuck?" he asked with a snort. She glared at him around Macklin's big brown body. "Sort of, but I'm fine." Macklin glanced between them. Then he seemed torn about staying with Hannah and soaking up more of her love or going to Cal and getting new attention. Macklin was honestly the most affectionate and biggest attention whore horse Cal had ever met. If you sat in his stall or on the ground outside near him, the big teddy bear would try to sit like a dog in your lap. It didn't matter that he was hundreds of pounds. He thought he was a lapdog. Hannah kissed Macklin's neck, which caused the horse to turn around, face her, and give the top of her head a lick. She scrunched her face in a cute way that said she appreciated the reciprocated kiss of the horse, but wasn't keen on the slobber. "Mac and I are just fine. You can go." He shrugged, then turned to go. "Don't sit on the ground too long. You'll get hemorrhoids." "That's an old wives' tale," she replied, irritation in her tone. He let the barn door close behind him, then went to his truck, grabbed everything he'd packed, and headed up to the farmhouse. Nobody should be alone at Christmas. Not him, not Hannah, not anybody. So even though she was stubborn and didn't seem to know any better, Cal was older, wiser, more patient, and a lot less stubborn. Or maybe he was more stubborn because he was persistent. Either way, he wasn't going to let her prickly disposition scare him away. Not when he saw in her eyes how desperately she didn't want to be alone for Christmas. However, she was also determined not to let anyone see that desperation. Her strength was admirable, possibly a little misguided, but still admirable. She didn't always have to be strong, though. Sometimes showing your vulnerable side was showing your strength. That you're strong enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to show the world, or at least a few trustworthy people in it, your flaws. He plunked everything he brought onto the kitchen table, found an apron with chickens all over it on a sky blue background, then got to work. It was over an hour before the sound of the front door opening broke through the kitchen noises. Then came the voice and stomping of a prickly woman. "What the fuck?" Bruno, as if seeing Cal for the first time today, raced over and demanded more attention. Only Cal's hands were soapy from doing dishes, so he had to dry them on his apron before he could bend down and give the dog some love, all while ignoring the angry glare of the woman with her hands on her shapely hips. Hannah cleared her throat, so he lifted his gaze up to her fire.
I'll ask again. What the fuck?
You told me to go. You didn't tell me to go home. I'm making dinner. Her eyes became thin slits as she took in his pizza-making station. It'd been a long-standing Christmas Eve tradition in his family when he was a kid. Homemade pizza for dinner along with a Christmas movie marathon while he and his dad, who'd been an architect, built the most epic gingerbread house. It's make-your-own pizza night, he said cheerfully. I have all kinds of toppings. Cheese is grated, sausage and bacon are cooked, onions are caramelized, and I found a pre-cooked chicken breast in the fridge. All you have to do is slather on the sauce, build your beast, and slide her into the oven. Her gaze remained narrow, but she slowly dropped her palms from her hips, wandered into the kitchen, and washed her hands at the sink. Still not having said a word, and with her eyes holding all kinds of skepticism, she went to the pizza-making station and began to build her pie. Cal grinned as he watched her ladle on the sauce, then put mushrooms, sausage, caramelized onions, and bacon on her pizza before sprinkling it with cheese. Then, because this was obviously not her first rodeo, she put the pepperoni on top of the cheese so that it would perfectly crisp up in the oven. He was pretty sure he was in love. Hannah made her pizza identical to his, and put her pepperoni on top of her cheese. Made his belly do several somersaults, and his body grew hot. Her expression relaxed sometime between putting on the onions and bacon. Then she stepped back and watched as he expertly slid the pizza paddle that he handmade and brought from home under the pizza, opened the oven, and shimmied it onto the pizza stone he also brought from home. He set the timer on the oven, then went to build his own pizza. The only difference between her pizza and his was that he added banana peppers and mixed his cheese with half mozzarella and half white cheddar. Mozzarella had the stretch, but cheddar was where the flavor was.
I'm going to go shower,
she said, her voice soft as she walked quietly behind him and down the hall.
Could you feed Bruno, please?
He smiled at her back just before she disappeared into the guest room, then glanced down at Bruno. I think she's finally warming up to me, buddy. Bruno cocked his head to the side. Cal grabbed a piece of pepperoni from the counter and tossed it into the air. Bruno leaped up and caught it in his mouth. Let's see if we can make her smile again with our movie choices, Bruno looked up at the counter where the pepperoni came from. Cal smiled, grabbed another piece, and tossed it to the dog before he went about making Bruno's actual dinner. He smelled her before he saw her. The exotic, fruity scent of her body wash or shampoo competed heavily with the enticing aroma of the pizza. Was that mango? Guava, maybe? Either way, he liked it. He was just pulling his pizza out of the oven when Hannah came around the corner. She was dressed down in a pair of flannel Christmas pajama pants. They had little snowmen on them on a red background. She wore a black tank top, no bra, and the same gray cable-knit cardigan she had on when he met her yesterday. Her hair was wet and in a long French braid down her back. "Did you scrub the Macklin slobber out of your hair?" he asked, using his special pizza scissors to cut her pizza into eighths now that it had cooled enough. She nodded, and her gaze slid to the bottle of red wine he had opened on the counter. He hadn't poured any for himself yet. He wanted to check to see if she drank red wine, and if she was comfortable if he had a glass too. He'd dated a woman once who was a recovering alcoholic, and she said that although she couldn't control what other people did, she generally just avoided being in the same space as alcohol and people consuming it because it made things easier for her. So now, Cal always made a point of checking with people before he just served up the Shiraz, or in this case, the Pinot Noir.
"Did you bring the wine?"
she asked, wandering over to the bottle, opening the cupboard above and pulling down two stemless glasses. "I did. You're welcome to a glass."
"Are you having one too?"
"Is that okay?" She shrugged one shoulder as she poured, but that shrug caused her cardigan to slip down her arm, exposing one slender shoulder and the tattoo on it. It was small, but it was beautiful. A realistic robin perched on a branch, all done in fine lines and grayscale. It couldn't have been more than 4 inches tall and 3 inches wide, but whoever had done the work was very talented. She finished pouring, set the wine bottle down, shrugged her cardigan back onto her shoulder, and picked up both glasses, wandering over to hand him one.
What's going on, Cal? She asked softly.
That's when he noticed her eyes and how puffy and red they were. He just chalked up her long shower to her washing her hair, but she'd probably been crying in there too. His chest tightened. "Nobody should be alone for Christmas," he said, accepting the wine glass. "Not you, not me, not anybody."
Maybe I want to be alone. He shook his head.
"No, you don't. You're just trying to put on a brave face, but you don't have to pretend with me."
I don't even know you. He took a sip.
"Then let's change that. What do you want to know?" Her eyes bore into him for a moment. Then she took a deep inhale and slowly released it, which let her shoulders climb down from her ears.
What's Cal short for?
"Callahan. It's my last name, actually. My first name is Peter, or Pete, but I've been Callahan or Cal since the Navy."
She nodded slowly and took a sip of her wine. The slow, sexy roll of her throat as she swallowed made his balls tighten up against his taint. Have you ever been married? He shook his head.
"Only to my job."
And your helicopter?
He grinned. "And my helicopter."
So, no kids? He shook his head again.
"No kids."
Pets?
"Want a dog, but haven't been able to find one that measures up to Bruno."
He glanced at the snoring dog in front of the wood stove. Bruno had spun around onto his back like a buffoon, and all four of his legs were in the air while his head was no longer in his bed but on the floor, and his tongue was hanging partially out of his mouth. The animal looked dead, or like he'd suffered significant brain damage. Hannah snorted. Oh yeah, he's one of a kind.
"I do want a dog, though."
I would love one too, but my apartment isn't pet-friendly and I'm gone too much between work and commuting. It wouldn't be fair.
Score. That was the first bit of information she'd volunteered about herself. He was breaking down her walls. Finally.
How long have you been in Colorado? She asked.
Not very long. Moved here just after Asher and Triss got married. I wasn't able to make it to the wedding. I came for a visit afterward, fell in love with the place, and decided to settle down for a bit. There's a cattle farmer not too far from here that lets me rent a cabin on the edge of his land. There's enough room to park Bella, and I monitor that part of his property for him.
What does "for a bit" mean? He shrugged.
I'm a bit of a vagabond. I never stay in one place very long.
Why's that?
He scratched at his chin. His 5 o'clock shadow usually came on around 2 o'clock, so now that it was closing in on 6, he had rough stubble that made a raspy noise against his fingertips. Not too sure. Maybe I just haven't found the right place yet. Or the right person.
Could this place be it?
If any place is gonna be, it'd be here. I love it, and there's loads of work for me. Always a rancher that needs help or somebody wanting a heli tour of the area. Even news channels have hired me. I help the cattle rancher too, help him find his cows. He's got thousands of acres and can't always find them by riding.
Her eyes roamed his body, sliding down his torso, which was still covered in the chicken apron. You pull off that apron better than most. His grin nearly broke his face.
Yeah?
She shrugged and disappeared with her wine into the living room. He finished tidying up, and by that time his pizza was cool enough to slice as well. Then he put 2 slices of their pizzas on plates and brought them and his wine into the living room.
Shall we watch a Christmas movie?
She curled up on the couch, with Bruno now snoring at her feet. Like Die Hard? He put his palm to his chest.
Marry me right now if you consider Die Hard a Christmas movie.
She rolled her eyes and smiled, accepting her plate of pizza. I mean, is it the best Christmas movie? No, but it is a Christmas movie. There's no argument there. Even though Bruce Willis says it's not, I disagree and will until the day I die.
Chuckling, he nodded. I can agree with that. So, what is the best Christmas movie?
He sat down beside her, careful to leave a gap between them so she wouldn't think he was playing at anything, then brought up his phone to cast whatever she decided onto the television. A Christmas Story, obviously. Nothing like that leg lamp, uncooked turkey, and a Red Ryder BB gun. She paused with the slice almost to her mouth. Oh, and Ovaltine. Excellent choice, Miss Harris. A Christmas Story it is. They ate their pizza, drank their wine, and watched the movie in companionable silence for a little while. But eventually, whatever curiosity had been niggling away at Hannah got the better of her. She got up to get more pizza and fill her wine, bringing back with her more questions. "Why are you being nice to me?" She sat back down on the couch. Bruno was on the kitchen tiles, sprawled out like a sleeping frog. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one," she blinked. "You don't know me, and all of this just feels like you're doing my uncles a favor." "Maybe it started out that way, but can it be something else now? We're two people who would otherwise be alone for Christmas. What's wrong with our spending it together?" "Because we're strangers." "We don't have to be. Can't we be friends?" Her eyes did that narrow, skeptical thing again. "Is that all you want to be?" Cal rolled his eyes and finished his wine glass. "I'd be lying if I said you weren't beautiful and I wasn't attracted to you, but we don't have to be anything more. I'm an adult, and I can be friends with another adult of the opposite sex. Nothing needs to happen between us." "Why aren't you married?" This woman switched gears faster than a Formula One driver. "Because I was married to my work. I had a girlfriend in high school, another one while I was in flight school, then it's just been—" "Casual hookups since then?" she asked, finishing his sentence. He shrugged. "Something like that. Not really fair to a person to be in a relationship with a man who is never around and always in danger." "No, I suppose not." "What about you? Why don't you have a boyfriend?" If she was going to ask the personal questions, that meant he could too, right? She huffed a derisive laugh and glanced away from him while taking a sip of her wine. "I've been told by more than one guy I dated that I am too much." What the fuck did that mean? And who the fuck were these small-dicked pricks? "What did they mean by that?" Cal asked, unable to completely hide the irritation in his tone. Her smile was thin and brittle as she shook her head. "I don't know. That I'm a big personality. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm fine with that. I don't have much of a filter. I call a spade, and I stand up for myself. Apparently, men don't like that. I'm too much." "Or they're not enough," he replied, his belly hot and free hand bunching into a fist on his lap. Her gaze dropped to his fist, then quickly lifted to his face. The sadness that had been there before was gone. What burned back at him was something brighter and more beautiful than an eclipse. His words were sinking in, and she was finally seeing those assholes who said that to her for what they really were. It wasn't that she was too much. It was that they weren't enough. They weren't man enough, strong enough, or confident enough to be with such a powerful, independent, and opinionated woman. Well, their fucking loss. "You're really not here because my uncles asked you to be?" she asked, her voice breathy and full of emotion. Her eyes glittered like two pieces of amber in the sunshine. "I came by to check on you yesterday because they asked me to, but I knew you'd have everything under control. Asher asked me to pop by, but I knew I didn't have to. I came because I wanted to, because I like you." She swallowed, and her bottom lip wobbled. "I really didn't want to be alone for Christmas." He smiled. "Me neither." "I'm sorry I was such a bitch before, pushing you away. I just hate people thinking I can't do something. It's confusing, you know, being called too much, but then people not thinking you're enough at the exact same time. Like I'm not capable enough here, or that I wouldn't have a good time tagging along with my brothers and their families in Hawaii. I mean, yeah, I probably wouldn't enjoy myself with either set of my parents, but I wasn't even considered. I'm too much, but also not enough." All he wanted to do right now was pull her against his chest and hug her hard enough for her to realize that she was absolutely enough. She wasn't too much. She was just right. And fuck everyone else. Fuck her parents, fuck her brothers, and fuck Asher and Nate for making her feel like they didn't believe in her. "Just because you can do something yourself doesn't mean you have to," he said gently. "If you have a team, call on them. Don't be afraid to ask a friend or a teammate to help you shoulder the load, to help you do it easier, better, faster, or just because two hands make the job less lonely." I've never really been part of a team. I always did solo stuff like piano and tennis. I'm the third child, the only girl, and my brothers are 7 and 5 years older than me. We were never a team. It was always them versus me. Well, that was fucked up. Big brothers were supposed to look out for their little sisters, not team up against them. He held out his hand for her to shake. Well, meet your first teammate. Name's Pete Callahan, but my friends call me Cal. And we are friends now, right?
She took his hand in her small, delicate one.
Right. Then before he could let go, she pulled his hand, which propelled his body forward and crushed her mouth to his. She was warm and soft and smelled delicious pressed up against him. And his cock was certainly on board, but Cal needed to get a couple of things straight before he went too far with his friend's niece. He gently pushed her away by her shoulders until she peeled her lips from his, blinking up at him in confusion. Are you drunk? He asked. She looked at him like he was crazy. I've had 1 glass and a sip of wine. No, I'm not drunk. Okay, that was a good answer. Are you drunk? She asked. Are these just beer, or in this case, wine goggles? Definitely not drunk, and definitely not wine goggles. I just don't want to take advantage of you. I want this to happen. I want you, but I don't want to take advantage when you're sad and... Cal, shut up. I'm a big girl, and right now I want to kiss you again and then eventually, hopefully, get naked. You're not taking advantage. I'm not drunk, and I hope to God I remember this in the morning, so unless you're having second thoughts, I suggest you kiss me.
Chapter 4. Hannah. You also have a butt that women would die for. Like, do you do 1,000 squats a day or something? 2,000, actually. She reared back and gently smacked his arm. Bullshit. He shook more on top of her as he chuckled, then lifted onto his forearms and gazed down at her. I'm kidding. But I used to do a lot of squats and deadlifts and shit when I was training. Guess I kept my butt. And the abs and the arms. She shook her head, wide-eyed with fascination. The man was like a work of art, sculpted from marble. He made Michelangelo's David look like Fred Flintstone. Slowly, carefully, he rolled off her and got up. She ogled his butt as he headed out of the bedroom. The sink ran in the bathroom, and he returned a moment later with a warm washcloth. Then he gently cleaned up between her legs like a gentleman. But she still needed to use the bathroom, so after he cleaned up his mess, she excused herself to the bathroom to ward off a UTI, then returned to the bed a few moments later. He welcomed her with an open arm, lifting the covers until she was snuggled in against him. That was unexpected, she said, facing away from him as he tucked in behind her in the spoon position. But not bad, right? He pressed his lips to her shoulder. Not bad at all. She didn't have to see him to know he was smiling. Thank you for pushing me. I'm sorry again for being a bitch when you first showed up. I'm not used to being on a team, and it just felt like Nate and Asher didn't trust me, that they sent you here to babysit me. I mean, they weren't even gone an hour and you showed up. He squeezed her tighter against him. That was more so I could just introduce myself. They didn't think you'd need any help after an hour. They just mentioned that if I was in the area, to pop in, introduce myself, and let you know I was around if you needed help. I see that now. But it felt like I was being assigned a babysitter. I can see how you'd feel that way, but I know you're entirely capable of taking care of this place on your own. The thing is, you don't have to. She spun around in his arms to face him, cupping his cheek. Why are you so wonderful? He smiled, closed his eyes for a moment, then tipped his head down. How is anyone supposed to answer that? Nothing seems to get you down. You've got to have a demon hidden somewhere. Otherwise, you're just too damn perfect. His eyes flashed open, and a pain she hadn't been prepared for stared back at her. She swallowed and braced herself. There were 10 of us on the team. There are 9 now. She pressed her hand to his heart. I'm sorry. We'd all returned home. Some of us had even retired. Like Brendan. He was young and had a wife and a new baby girl. But after what happened in Peru, I didn't see it, but I know what they saw. He was a shattered man. Took his own life. Her heart ached like it was being squeezed by her ribcage. She cupped his cheek. I'm so sorry. Anger flickered in the spinach green of his eyes. He could have asked for help. Any one of us would have flown to Jackson Hole and gone with him to a VA meeting, talked through his issues, done whatever we could to help him. But he didn't ask. He didn't lean on his team. He took it all on himself, that motherfucker. He shouldered it all alone, even when he knew how important it was to rely on his team, to not attempt to fight off the monsters by yourself. And now his daughter is growing up without her daddy, because he was too fucking prideful to pick up the phone and call me and tell me he was having a hard time. This explained so much about why Cal was so eager to help. To lighten someone else's load. Not to let them be alone, particularly on a holiday where the rate of suicide and self-harm increased. Not that Hannah would ever consider taking her own life, but Cal didn't know that. All he saw was a sad, lonely woman with a chip on her shoulder. So, unlike his friend Brendan, who hadn't asked for help, who hadn't been close enough for Cal to see signs of distress, he was doing what he could to help Hannah, to save her. It's why my other brothers and I check in on each other all the time. We have a group chat, and at least once a week we all post something. Unless one of us is on a mission and has told the rest that we're going dark. But we do it so that nobody ever feels alone. So we all know that as isolated as we might feel, when we feel like nobody around us understands what we're feeling or thinking, that there are those who get it. We just need to send a message. And a simple 911 text is all it takes for one of us to fly to the other one. That's amazing, that you've set up such a system between all of you. That you have that support system. That team. None of us would be alive without it. Without each other. Every single one of them knows that if they texted 911, I'd be in Bella and flying to wherever they are in a heartbeat. We all would. She kissed his strong jaw, the rough, rusty stubble prickly against her lips. You're a good friend, Peter Callahan. A good teammate. His smile was sad before he pressed a kiss to her forehead. Hungry? Famished. He slid out of bed. I'll go grab us some pizza. Stay here, and don't you dare put on any clothes. She beamed at him, then gave him a cheeky salute. Sir, yes, sir. She was not prepared to be tackled on the bed by a red-headed, growling man with an octopus tattoo. But she was sure happy that she was. Hannah woke on Christmas morning with a smile on her face. She stretched her legs, pointing her toes, and reached her arms above her head, wrapping her fingers around the top of the headboard. Then, she crossed her fingers that last night hadn't been a dream, before she finally opened her eyes and rolled over to the side of the bed where Cal had fallen asleep. Only, There was no sexy tattooed seal with a ruddy 5 o'clock shadow and spinach-colored eyes laying beside her. That side of the bed was empty. Her heart tightened, and her mouth dipped into a frown. Had it all been a dream? She sat up, and the pleasant ache between her legs, along with the slight chafe around her nipples from his scruff, told her that it was no dream. Phew. So, where was he? Not wanting to jump to too many conclusions, she slid out of bed, put on her pajamas and a housecoat, slipped into her slippers, then scuffed her way into the house. The wood stove had been stoked, and the house was warm. And, oh yeah, it was also Christmas morning. "Cal?" she called out. There was no answer. "Bruno?" Also, no answer. More sadness filled the space in her chest around her heart. She knew he was attached to the dog, but would he really take her uncle's dog with him? Was she also too much for Cal? Did he decide in the middle of the night that he couldn't handle another day with her? So he skedaddled in the early morning, taking her different-colored-eyed companion with him? She had his phone number on a piece of paper stuck to the fridge. Should she call him? Don't jump to conclusions, Hannah. Maybe he just took Bruno outside for a pee. Right. Maybe that's all it was. She opened the front door, only to be met with an empty driveway where his truck was parked last night. The sun shone, the sky was clear, and there seemed to be very little wind. It was a beautiful Christmas morning she wished she could appreciate. But she couldn't. Not properly, anyway, thanks to the overwhelming sadness that replaced the last traces of joy she'd felt last night. And now, she didn't even have Bruno. Did he take Macklin, too? Did he take all of her therapy animals? She was halfway through changing from her slippers to her boots when the rattling sound of a helicopter drawing closer echoed above. She quickly threw on the other boot, grabbed her winter coat from the hook, and darted out the front door, just in time to see a beautiful black helicopter zoom over the top of the farmhouse, terrifyingly low, and head toward the nearest field. Careful not to break her neck, or her hip, again, she navigated the gravel driveway slowly, avoiding the divots that were now icy puddles. She reached the closest field just as the helicopter touched down on the crispy white grass dressed in frost. A bark from inside the helicopter made her laugh. Once the rotors stopped spinning, the door opened and out came her red-headed seal and a very happy dog. "Merry Christmas, Hannah," Cal cheered, running up to her. She blinked through the tears, swallowed, and smiled. "Merry Christmas." He ducked under the fence and lifted her up, making her feet dangle, then set her back down and kissed her hard on the mouth. When they finally came up for air, he was smiling, and she was crying. His face turned serious. "What's wrong?" "I thought you'd left." She tried to smile, but it was brittle and flat. "I thought that you decided I was too much, too, and left. And took my dog." "You're definitely not too much. I'm an early riser by nature. Saw that it was a gorgeous morning and thought, why not take you out for a spin in Bella? And Bruno loves riding in the helicopter. So I fed him, let him out, then brought him with me so you could sleep in a little." She blinked through more tears. "I'm sorry that I assumed the worst. I kind of have a habit of doing that." He shrugged. "No big deal. But just know, you're definitely not too much. You're just the right amount." She beamed up at him. "I should probably go change." He nodded. "Get dressed. I'll go start opening up the farm, feed the animals, and then once we're done we can go for a ride. I dug some blackberry scones out of my freezer that I made this summer, so we can have those and the coffee and tea in the thermoses I brought for breakfast. And I figured turkey dinner and Die Hard marathon tonight." Her smile was going to break her face. Where did you come from, Pete Callahan? He pointed north.
That way. About 9 miles.
She tossed her head back and laughed, but he only took that as an invitation to dip her low and kiss her. Once they came up for air, they ran back toward the house so she could get dressed and he could feed the animals. Within an hour, they were up in the air, headphones on, taking in the beauty of the rolling hills dressed in frost as the morning rays turned them into shimmering piles of diamonds. It was honestly the best Christmas morning Hannah could ever remember. The scones were delicious, the tea was perfect, and Cal was a great tour guide. He pointed out his little cabin on the edge of the cattle ranch, showed her Asher and Nate's cabins on their land that they rented out in the spring and summer, and even let her try flying Bella. Sort of. They parked at the top of a hill, near the furthest of her uncle's cabins, and because it was too chilly to get out, they stayed in the helicopter, removed their headsets, and just watched the day get brighter. I can almost feel the magic in the air, she said, sipping her Earl Grey tea from the travel mug he brought. How do you know she liked Earl Grey tea? Did he message her uncles and ask?
Oh, I definitely can,
he said, taking a bite of his butter-slathered scone. He reached for her hand with his free one and linked their fingers together.
I'd like to continue helping you on the ranch until you leave, if that's okay.
Hannah couldn't keep the smile off her face if she tried. It's definitely okay.
Merry Christmas, Hannah.
Merry Christmas, Cal. Thank you for being on my team. I didn't know I needed a team, but now I'm really grateful that I have one.
I'll always be on your team, Hannah, because you're just the right amount.
She squeezed his hand. And you're enough. Epilogue. Hannah. 6 months later. That's the last box, I think, Hannah said, plunking a big moving box filled with her life into the middle of Cal's living room. His green eyes went wide as he gazed around his small cabin at the mountains of boxes.
I think we're going to need to get a bigger place.
She bounced on her toes over to him and looped her arms around his neck. Or we use the boxes to build the sex fort. He wrapped his arms around her waist.
Well, yeah, of course. We'll do that first. Then we think about getting a bigger place.
We knew this place would be too small for both of us.
I know. I just didn't consider that with you moving in, that also meant all of your worldly possessions, which seems to be a lot.
She cleared her throat and gave him a poignant look. I quit my job and moved across the country to be with you, Peter.
And your best friend gave you a job at her speech path clinic, and I'm madly in love with you. I don't think that you're that hard done by.
He returned her cheeky look with one of his own, moving his hands down to her butt and cupping it.
But a bigger place is a must. I'll start putting out feelers tomorrow. Or maybe we can just build.
Maybe I can sweet-talk my uncles into letting us build on their land. They have enough of it. His nod was non-committal. They'd done the long-distance thing for 6 months, while she tied up loose ends in Manhattan, and gave her clinic enough time to hire and train her replacement. But every time she came back to Colorado to be with Cal, she knew it was where she was meant to be. She loathed having to return to New York, and wanted to get back to him and the wide-open spaces of the country the moment she stepped foot back in her cramped little apartment. And they were getting a dog. A Merle Aussie Shepherd just like Bruno. The puppy was 7 weeks old and absolutely gorgeous. They picked up John McClane, or Mac, for short, in just 2 weeks. Anytime Hannah thought about the puppy, butterflies filled her belly, and she got giddy. But yeah, she had a lot of stuff, and Cal lived minimally. She did not. and she thought she'd done a pretty good job purging before she left New York. They'd need to get a bigger place or find somewhere to store her stuff. All of that could wait, though. Right now, the sun was shining, the birds were chirping, there was a robin's nest in a tree next to where she parked her Chevy Blazer, and she was finally, at long last, with the man she loved. Stuff could wait. Celebrating could not. "Let's say we take this celebration to the bedroom," she said, backing him up toward the one bedroom in the cabin. But they didn't get very far until they bumped into boxes. And then more boxes. Crap. Cal chuckled. "Let's say we take this outside." Then he scooped her up and carried her over the threshold in the other direction, outside the house, to the small veranda Cal had built on the southwest side of the cabin. It provided the best view of the sunset, the hills, and the river down below. He had a hibachi barbecue, table and chairs, and an umbrella. But what she hadn't expected was the picnic on the picnic blanket, complete with candles, a picnic basket, and sparkling wine on ice. "When did you do this?" she asked, sliding down to her feet and gazing at him in amazement. "Sometime between box 59 and box 67, he teased, taking her hand and pulling her down to the blanket. She stuck her tongue out at him. Okay, I have a lot of shit. I'll do some more purging, and sweet-talk my uncles into letting us build on their ranch." He deployed the cork from the Prosecco and poured them each a flute. Then he lifted his glass in the air. "To being just the right amount, being a team player, and asking for help." Tears burned the back of her eyes as she met his gaze and swallowed past the lump of emotion in her throat. She clinked her glass against his. To being enough, being part of a team, and accepting help when it's offered. I love you, Peter Cal Callahan, and I can't wait to start my life with you. "You, me, and John Mac McLean," he said, taking a sip of his Prosecco. "I think it's going to be one heck of a good life." She beamed up at him. "The life we both deserve." We hope you enjoyed listening to Unexpected Christmas with the Seal, written by Whitley Cox, performed in dual narration by Molly Stark and Liam DeCosimo, produced by Pinup Audio, text copyright 2025 by Whitley Cox, production copyright 2025 by Whitley Cox, all rights reserved.